Now, according to your reporting in the Washington Post, it's been quite a night, Oz. I'm so sorry. Here's what you wrote. Santos said in a 2020 financial disclosure that he had no assets or earned income, and he only cited a commission worth more than $5,000. But by the time Santos filed his 2022 financial disclosure, he declared he was worth millions of dollars, with most of the wealth coming from a Florida company in which he was the sole owner, the DeVolder organization. Ozzy, do we know what happened between his unsuccessful run for Congress in 2020 and 2022?
We don't. What he has tried to explain in a couple of friendly interviews is that he gained work experience at locations and companies that he's not really specific about, but that he learned so much that when he opened up his own firm, he was incredibly successful. In fact, so successful, he earned enough money to invest in his congressional run. That's a story.
Okay, so speaking of that money he invested into his congressional run, that was $700,000. He loaned his campaign $700,000. Do we know where that money came from?
We don't. That's one of the questions that my colleagues and I and other reporters are trying to ask. And it appears that Representative-elect Santos is going to select outlets where his entire defense is a noun, a verb, embellishment, and then attack the media. So he is not really being forthcoming, all the while saying that he will explain or that he has explained. In fact, I think on another network this evening, he spoke to someone and he said, look, it's just too complicated to go over most people's heads to explain this. So your question is exactly what we have. The more he speaks, the more questions are raised. And I think that is problematic for his colleagues. In one of his interviews, he said of his soon-to-be congressional colleagues that none of them would survive the kind of scrutiny he's been under, sort of implying that they're all liars to the same degree that he is. So I don't know what kind of reception he's going to have once he arrives in Washington.
Yeah, and just listening to your description there, he sounds very Trumpian. But let's talk about one of his soon-to-be colleagues, assuming he actually gets sworn in a week from tonight. Congressman-elect Nick LaLota of New York is the first Republican to call for a House ethics investigation into George Santos. Do you think other Republicans will follow?
It's not clear. So the Republican Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy does not have an interest in picking this fight. I think he is more worried about getting 218 votes and becoming Speaker, which is a hurdle that he's quite not reaching. But I think the New York Republicans who are in and around Santos, they are much more worried and concerned about this. And you can tell by the deafening silence. Congressman Lee Zeldin, who represents part of Long Island, who was talked about as a potential RNC chairperson, who ran a very strong race for governor, and who endorsed Santos, hasn't said anything. And some of the other representative-elects who are coming in to Congress from New York have also been somewhat quiet. That's not a ringing endorsement for someone who's going to be working with this guy.
Right. Well, there's one incoming congressman-elect from New York who's not being silent, is former federal prosecutor and Democrat Dan Goldman, who released a statement saying that George Santos, quote, must be thoroughly investigated by the Federal Election Commission and the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of New York for campaign finance fraud. Now, do you know, are we hearing from George Santos's voters or his future constituents as a result of all of these stories coming out about his lies?
When I've called and spoken to local Republicans, people who lead local Republican clubs, some elected officials, and even some people, I spoke to someone at a Rotary Club this evening whose club sort of services part of the district, but this person himself lives just next door. They all took a wait and see approach, but none of them felt easy. None of them felt comfortable. None of them felt proud of having flipped a seat, seeing somebody come into office, and then having this be the first major story. So there was a lot of unease. before he started giving this embellishment explanation. And I don't know how many votes he's won or how much he's built trust with people. But you're right. It sounds Trumpian, claim that you're the victim, double down on your version of the truth and attack the media. And that seems to be a strategy going forward.